Tonight, another apparent attempted assassination of Donald Trump. A man is under arrest for allegedly pointing a rifle at the former president. Hello, I'm Jeremy Fernandez. This is ABC News. A not guilty verdict in the long-running murder case of a missing young mother. A big change to the heritage listing for Sydney's PowerHouse Museum. The actor Elizabeth Debicki, the only Australian to have won at the Emmys. And Oscarpiastri gets his second Grand Prix victory, securing a big move for McLaren. Donald Trump has survived another apparent assassination attempt. This time, the Republican nominee for president was on his golf course in Florida when a Secret Service agent opened fire at a man who was believed to be holding an assault rifle. The suspect has been arrested and identified. Authorities are now probing what motivated the would-be assassin just 7 weeks from Election Day. North America correspondent Barbara Miller is in West Palm Beach, Florida.
I think one has like a rifle pointed to the car or something.
The moment when another apparent assassination attempt on the former president ends in an arrest.
They got 30 vehicles blocking the highway.
The suspect is taken into custody after seemingly trying to flee. Authorities allege the man was hiding in bushes near Donald Trump's golf course in West Palm Beach, Florida, when a Secret Service agent noticed the barrel of a gun sticking out.
We are not sure right now if the individual was able to take a shot at our agents.
Donald Trump was a short distance behind the agent who opened fire.
They have an agent that jumps one hole ahead of time to where the president was at. And he was able to spot this rifle barrel sticking out of the fence and immediately engage that individual.
Had he not been seen, he could have had a clear shot.
Between 300 and 500 yards, but with a rifle and a scope like that, that's not a long distance.
Police say the suspect ditched his weapons, an AK-47, a GoPro camera, scope and 2 backpacks as he fled the scene. US media have identified the suspect as 58-year-old Ryan Wesley Routh, a man with strong views on world politics. He had apparently travelled to Ukraine after the Russian invasion and was turned down when he tried to sign up to fight.
I have no military experience, so they're like, you're not an ideal candidate.
But he seemingly ran this website encouraging Westerners to fight for Ukraine, and another advocating for an international legion for Taiwan.
Thank you.
This comes only 2 months after Donald Trump narrowly escaped death when a gunman opened fire at a rally in Pennsylvania. The head of the Secret Service resigned after it, admitting it was the agency's worst failure in decades. There will now be more questions about how someone could have been close enough to threaten the former president's life again.
He's not the sitting president. If he was, we would have had this entire golf course around it. But because he's not, the security is limited to the areas that the Secret Service deems possible.
President Joe Biden issued a statement saying he had directed his team to ensure the former president's continued safety. Vice President Kamala Harris, the Democratic presidential nominee, echoed those sentiments, writing, "Violence has no place in America." The Republicans' running mate, J.D. Vance, says he spoke to Mr. Trump before the news was public and that Mr. Trump was amazingly in good spirits. In a post on social media, the Republican leader thanked people for their concern and well wishes and reiterated that he was safe, praising law enforcement for its response. Donald Trump has events scheduled this week, including a town hall in Michigan in a couple of days' time. And pushing ahead would fit with the fighting stance his supporters have come to expect from him. But it's hard to see how events here would not have some impact on campaigning over the next 50 days until the election. As for the polls, well, they've shown very little movement through a previous assassination attempt, a change of candidate, and 2 noteworthy debates. All the signs are that despite its remarkable twists and turns, 2024 remains a very close race. Barbara Miller, ABC News, West Palm Beach, Florida.
One of the federal government's housing packages is set to be blocked by the opposition and the Greens in the Senate. They claim it'll do little to improve affordability. But the Prime Minister says the Senate is obstructing his government's agenda. From Canberra, here's political reporter Matthew Doran.
Australia's suburbs are growing.
These beautiful homes where we've got lots of new families moving in.
But not fast enough. The government insists it's drawn up the plans to help.
Something that should frankly have sailed through the parliament before now.
The Prime Minister pressuring the Senate to back his Help to Buy legislation, which would allow the government to take a share of up to 40% of a house for 40,000 low-income households.
This is a scheme where the government comes in as the bank of mum and dad.
These two bills that are before the Senate today aren't going to make a whit of difference to the number of people that own their own home.
The government insisting the Greens in the Senate are the impediment to progress.
Can they get anything done this week?
The Greens in turn accusing Anthony Albanese of taking inspiration from an unlikely source.
Our previous Prime Minister was a bulldozer. Let's not forget, that didn't end so well.
I mean, give us all a break, really.
The fiery debate spilling over in the chamber.
The government is pulling a political stunt.
Labor labelling the Greens' ongoing opposition to the proposal as evidence they're in cahoots with the opposition leader, Peter Dutton.
And you empower him. You empower him.
Now, this is such good policy. It was part of the Greens election platform in 2022.
Our position that we took to the election was very different. It was a much bigger government-backed and government-owned scheme.
Two Albanese government housing policies hang in the balance, and there is little doubt the government would like to see both through Parliament. But if the current impasse continues, the shape of an argument which will rage through an election campaign can be made out. Labor portraying the Greens as grandstanding obstructionists, while the Greens claim the government is too timid. On current indications, it could take voters to break the deadlock. Matthew Doran, ABC News, Canberra.
More than 2 decades after Amber Haig disappeared, a couple from regional New South Wales has been found not guilty of her murder. In the judge-only trial, a Supreme Court justice found that Robert and Anne Jeeves' version of events may be true, allowing them to walk free after spending the past 2 years behind bars.
Robert and Anne Jeeves spent 29 days on trial, but today Justice Julia Lonergan focused on a broader question.
Who is Amber Haig and what did we learn about her from the evidence?
Amber Haig was a 19-year-old with an intellectual disability who went missing in June 2002. At the time, she had a 5-month-old son fathered by Robert Jeeves and lived on and off with the married couple on their farm near Young. The prosecution had argued the Jeeves killed Amber so they could take custody of the baby boy. Today, Justice Lonergan said,
"There is no evidence that Amber's 2001 to 2002 pregnancy was embraced with the attitude that it was an opportunity for them, Robert and Anne, to have another child."
When they were first questioned in 2002, the Jeeves told investigators they last saw Amber on the 5th of June. They said they bought Amber a hot dog, saw her make a withdrawal at an ATM, then dropped her off at Campbelltown Station so she could visit her dying father.
I have decided that the version of events provided by the accused may be true. In those circumstances, I must acquit.
Both aged 64, the couple had been in custody since their arrest more than 2 years ago. Justice Lonergan spent much of her summary detailing Amber Haig's troubled history with her own family, saying she bore the scars of a jagged, abusive childhood. She said the Jeeves provided her with assistance, and there was nothing sinister about it. More than 2 decades on, Amber Haig's body has never been found.
Amber went back and forth between places and people, looking for love and solace. She never found it.
How she died remains a mystery. Monty Jacker, ABC News, Sydney.
A court in Sydney has been played CCTV of 3 men charged with allegedly performing Nazi salutes outside the Jewish Museum in Sydney's east. A security guard called police after seeing these videos in October. They recorded Ryan Marshall, Daniel Muston and Anthony Mitchell outside the museum on a break from work. The 3 men have pleaded not guilty to an offence under changes that were made to the law in 2022, making it illegal to display Nazi symbols. Mr Mitchell's lawyer argues he was mimicking a skit by the British comedian Ricky Gervais.
I would like to apologise to some people that were affected, but a joke is a joke. That's all I can say right now.
One of Sydney's most popular cultural institutions will be protected forever after an expanded heritage listing. It means despite shifting development plans, the PowerHouse Museum in Ultimo must remain a museum.
It's long been a drawcard for young and old. The PowerHouse Museum's Ultimo site is now at a turning point.
This listing is an exciting moment in the history of the Powerhouse in terms of securing its future and the precinct's future in its location in Ultimo.
Plans for the precinct have long shifted. The previous Liberal government intended on demolishing parts of the complex for a mixed cultural and commercial development. Now, changes to the building's heritage listing mean the entire site must remain exclusively as a museum.
This listing recognises our community's connection with this museum, but it also enables the museum to move forward with this new revitalisation project.
Protections which previously only covered the original power station have now been expanded to include the RAN building and the Galleria. Plans are already underway to restore those buildings and give the area a $300 million facelift.
There's been a bit of concern in the past that maybe the museum would be closed. This is yet more proof, absolutely, that it won't be. That instead what we're going to have is a brilliant new facility with the kind of revitalisation that you can only manage once in a century.
It's been 6 months since the powerhouse closed and it's since been completely emptied. The government's hoping a builder can be appointed by the end of the year and work can begin in 2025. More than 3,000 objects have been relocated as part of the big move out. The biggest is the World War II era Catalina, which will be exhibited temporarily at the Haas Aviation Museum in Albion Park. Over at the Powerhouse Parramatta site, things are taking shape.
And so we're really moving into that next final stage of the construction of the museum.
Powering up to put a new future on display. Sean Tarrant-Goodwin, ABC News, Sydney.
It was a night where a sweeping subtitled Japanese epic smashed records. Shogun has dominated this year's Emmy Awards in Los Angeles and become the first non-English language series to win the title for Best Drama. The actress Elizabeth Debicki was the only Australian winner, picking up an Emmy for her portrayal of Princess Diana.
Capturing the essence of the People's Princess won Elizabeth Debicki the crown for Best Supporting Actress.
Playing this part based on this unparalleled, incredible human being has been my great privilege. It has been a gift.
But the night belonged to Shogun. The historic Japanese epic took home a record haul of 18 awards, including Best Drama.
You guys greenlit a very expensive, subtitled Japanese period piece whose central climax revolves around a poetry competition. I have no idea why you did that.
While its two leads became the first Japanese actors to win Emmys. The dark drama Baby Reindeer turned its creators' disturbing life experiences into TV gold.
Take risks, push boundaries, explore the uncomfortable, dare to fail in order to achieve.
Hacks was a surprise winner for Best Comedy, with An Acting Gong for its lead.
The amazing Jean Smart.
I appreciate this because I just don't get enough attention.
And there was another standing ovation as movie star Jodie Foster won her first Emmy for True Detective.
Well, this is an incredibly emotional moment.
And chaotic kitchen series The Bear served up 11 awards.
So all the Latinas who are looking at me, keep believing and vote. Vote for your rights.
In an Emmy field that was more diverse than ever. Sarah Gerrithy, ABC News.
Coming up on 7:30, the builders going bust, leaving Australians without homes.
My gut was telling me that the big red flags were obviously popping up.
Insolvencies in the construction sector are at historic highs.
It's pretty disappointing to see the building the way it is at the moment.
All our materials have just skyrocketed.
And I'll speak to the Federal Housing Minister, Claire O'Neill.
It's been described as the lost year of high school, where learning and engagement can take a dive. In Year 9, the educational gap between advantaged and disadvantaged students widens by more than 5 years. Schools across the country have adopted a specialised program for Year 9 students to try to keep them on track.
At St Patrick's High School in Tasmania's north, the Year 9 students dance to a different beat. There's less time in traditional classrooms and more time for things like aquaculture, housing and design, and cooking.
This semester we're actually making cheese. I got to do photography for the first time.
The specialised Year 9 program also includes rites of passage, involving reflection and outdoor challenges.
It acknowledges that 14 and 15-year-olds do take risks. They want to be challenged. It builds resilience.
When students hit Year 9, many are dealing with changes to their bodies, brains, and experiencing social pressure.
Schools have found Year 9 to be a bit of a tricky year. Some teachers have even gone so far as describing Year 9 to me as a bit of a lost year.
The data shows a downward slide in results from primary school to Year 9. The gap between advantaged and disadvantaged students becomes wider.
That gap between students in the more advantaged families is about 2 years ahead of students from more disadvantaged families in Year 3. By the time students reach Year 9, that gap more than doubles. In reading, it's over 5 years.
A number of government and non-government schools across the country have specialised Year 9 programs to keep students engaged. As these Year 9s head back to the classroom for their final years of school, they'll be armed with new skills and plenty of memories.
I'm almost ready to take that big leap.
And they're preparing us well, so I think we'll be okay.
Fiona Blackwood, ABC News.
On this day 49 years ago, the Australian flag was lowered in Papua New Guinea's capital to mark the end of 70 years of colonial rule. To mark the young nation's Independence Day, tens of thousands of people have turned out across the country to celebrate progress with an eye on the challenges ahead. ABC correspondent Marion Farr reports from Port Moresby.
The celebrations started early with fireworks over the capital. And as dawn broke this morning, whistles and cheers greeted the raising of PNG's flag on Independence Hill. A country of hundreds of tribes united.
It was not too long ago when our fathers and mothers decided to forge the most diverse nation on the face of planet Earth into one unity.
On this day in 1975, the Australian flag was lowered for the final time. It marked the end of almost a century of colonial rule under Germany, Britain and then Australia.
Gough Whitlam said it was his proudest achievement in office to have birthed Papua New Guinean independence, and I think that's a wonderful legacy.
People here couldn't agree more.
Today we are celebrating independence today. We're so very happy here and so excited here.
I feel proud of my country, Papua New Guinea, because that's the time where people come together, celebrate in culture.
What you're seeing here is just a taste of what's to come, with Papua New Guinea already gearing up for its 50th anniversary of independence next year. It'll be a time to reflect on how far the country has come and the ongoing challenges it faces, such as unemployment, poverty and women's rights.
This generation, under my words, pledge that we will not let the dream go to waste, but we will do our absolute best to ensure we pass on a better PNG to our children.
Determination and hope for a young nation looking towards the future. Marion Farr, ABC News, Port Moresby.
Let's turn to finance now. Here's David Chow.
Well, the share market was just a whisker away from hitting a new record, with the All Ords up by 0.2%. But I'm sure we all remember what happened a month and a half ago when we last reached those levels of exuberance. Now, this Thursday's US interest rate decision appears to be behind today's relative optimism. There's no question there'll be a rate reduction, but here, size matters. The odds of a big 50 basis point rate cut have jumped to 57%, which will likely lead to Donald Trump feeling very annoyed, as rate cuts usually benefit the party that's currently in power, even though they're not responsible for it. Staying overseas, Wall Street and Britain were relatively upbeat, while markets in Japan and China were closed for public holidays. And back home, Alcoa jumped nearly 6% after announcing plans to sell its 25% stake in a Saudi aluminium operation for $1.6 billion. And at $143, Commonwealth Bank is close to hitting a new record. Now, that bank's an interesting one. When you compare CBA's share price with analyst estimates of how much it's expected to earn over the next year, it looks a bit overvalued, especially compared to the All Ords, BHP, JP Morgan, which is America's biggest bank, by the way, and even tech giants like Google, which have a lot more growth potential, especially in the world of AI. Now, in commodities, the price of gold hit a fresh record high, while oil and iron ore fell, and the Aussie dollar is buying 67.2 US cents. And that's finance.
Australia's Oscarpiastri has claimed a Formula One victory for just the second time in his career, taking out the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. The McLaren driver triumphed after an epic duel with Ferrari's Charles Leclerc.
The Aussie flag flying high. Oscarpiastri, the toast of the Formula One world. The 23-year-old Victorian took the checkered flag for just the second time in his burgeoning career.
It's the Aussie on top in Baku.
To move up to fourth on the drivers' standings and elevate McLaren to the top of the team's championship.
Yeah, I think considering where we started when I joined the team last year, we were literally last, and now we are leading the World Championships.
The Aussie started from second on the grid.
And foot to the floor as we go racing in Baku.
And on lap 20, he made his move.
Piastri down the inside, late on the brakes, makes the move stick. And Piastri takes the lead of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix.
Went for a pretty big lunge, but managed to pull it up and then hung on for dear life for the next 35 laps.
Ferrari's Charles Leclerc tried valiantly to wrestle the lead back. Piastri would persevere. When Sergio Perez and Carlos Sainz had a horror crash late, the Aussie would cruise to victory under a safety flag.
Results like this definitely weren't possible 12 months ago for myself, so it's a massive team effort, and yeah, excited to see what the future holds.
For a youngster in just his second Formula One season, that is certainly an exciting proposition. Next up for Piastri, the Singapore Grand Prix next week. Daniel Garb, ABC News.
In the NRL, teams are back at training ahead of this week's sudden death semi-finals in Sydney. The Cowboys are preparing to put their strong away record to the test, while the Roosters gear up for their first do-or-die finals game.
North Queensland's home final delivered another masterclass from departing Cowboys winger Kyle Feldt.
Feldt with the big play for the Cowboys.
When I was running, to see the crowd up on their feet and seeing all the flags fly, it was a moment I'll remember for a long time.
After eliminating Newcastle, the crusade continues.
I'm letting it sink in a little bit more. I'm really enjoying taking it week by week and day by day a little bit more and not looking too far ahead.
The Cowboys will face the Sharks in Sydney on Friday in a game that will test their away-from-home record. Perfecting their approach to travel has been central to North Queensland's success this season. So far, they've won more games away than at home.
It's your personal obligation to give yourself to the team on away trips and make sure your routine's quite similar to home. So, maybe the boys are doing that.
The Tricolours struggled against the Panthers without forward Jared Warrior-Hargraves, but the forceful Roosters prop will make a timely return from suspension this week.
I know we would have heard from him watching us on the weekend, and I know he's going to bring that for us.
Tedesco marks 250 NRL games in Saturday's sudden death semi-final against Manly.
It's an important game to sort of celebrate it in, but yeah, I'm obviously proud of the journey and there's still plenty to go.
Part of that journey is a 2024 finals campaign the skipper hopes will last another week. Chloe Shumicki, ABC News.
The Swans have a selection dilemma ahead of their must-win clash against Port Adelaide on Friday night. Coach John Longmire says he has options to replace captain Callum Mills, who was injured in training last week. Geelong is also facing selection issues ahead of Saturday night's preliminary final against Brisbane.
Chris Scott will be doing a lot of walking and talking this week. The Cats coach has tough decisions to make. At the top of the list, a retiring champion pushing for one last hurrah.
It's so touch and go with, the timing of how his foot is healing.
A sore foot has sidelined Tom Hawkins since late June. The 35-year-old recently returned via the VFL and is pressing his case for a senior return against the Lions.
I'm lucky I don't have to sit in the committee and make the big decisions, but he's given himself every chance, and that's all you can ask for from a great teammate.
Cam Guthrie is another veteran pushing for selection. Young, tall Sam De Koning could be recalled, while important midfielder Tom Stewart appears fit and will almost certainly return.
It's great to have a full team at this time of year, but it's a challenging time as well.
Sydney is facing its own selection dilemma as it prepares for Port Adelaide. The Swans must replace captain Callum Mills, who injured his hamstring in a training mishap.
It was disappointing. It was, he's, as we know, a very important player for us. We can't replace his leadership ability. He's very good in that space, but we've got some options there.
John Longmire says coaching is a tough job after Ken Hinkley was fined $20,000 for instigating a verbal altercation with Hawthorn players on Friday night.
Coach is at the front and centre of a lot of things. Kenny's done a fantastic job with that football team.
The Power are doing their best to move on.
It happened, it got dealt with, and now we're done with it.
Tom Maddox, ABC News.
Let's take a look at the weather now. And Tom, we're in the grips of a severe spring cold snap.
Jeremy, temperatures plummeted as much as 10 degrees below average through the weekend, delivering snow to low levels across southeast Australia. That was Waratah in Tasmania on Saturday morning, and there's Nimminable in southeast New South Wales on Saturday afternoon. And after the snow came the frost. Albury on Sunday morning woke to -2 degrees. That was the city's coldest spring temperature in 42 years. Now, that was followed by -3 in Hay this morning, their equal coldest on record. Wagga Wagga's -3 was their coldest for spring in 58 years, while a spring record was measured in Canberra this morning, a bone-chilling -7. Around Sydney, the overnight low dropped to -1 at Mount Boyce, 1 in Campbelltown and 2 in Richmond. All 3 were 6 below the average. The city's minimum of 7 was the coldest in 12 years for September. Sunny skies and lighter subtleties then lifted highs to around 20, although still up to 4 below average across Sydney's west. The state's low was -8 at Cooma, and that was only 1 degree off their record. Goulburn also icy at -6. Now, maximums today were not as cold as yesterday, but still below average for most towns. The state's high was 23 degrees at Singleton. On the satellite then, well, some cloud is still being driven over the south in cold southwesterly winds, and a very unusual cloud band is forming across the north for September. That's as the cold air surges well north and interacts with tropical moisture. On the chart then, well, cold winds will continue to ease tomorrow as this front moves away and a high drifts in from the west. Around the country, rare dry season rain on the forecast for Darwin. Should be dry for the southern capitals after a frosty night in Canberra and Adelaide. Now for the northeast, cold tonight, frost patches on the ranges, then a mostly sunny day, some cloud for the coast and just a slight chance of the odd shower. For the southeast, widespread severe frost on the ranges to start the day, then mostly sunny. Highs should reach the low 20s along the coast and around the mid to high teens for the ranges. To the west, a chilly night for all regions, waking to areas of frost apart from in the far northwest. Also the chance of fog across the south. Mostly sunny with residual cool air still keeping temperatures slightly below the average. On the waters, we'll have strong winds off the central and north coast, but easing early tomorrow. However, strong winds will continue off the far south coast and the seas will average up to 2.5 metres. Now for Sydney, cool tonight, down to 11 in the city, as low as 3 degrees in the west. Mostly sunny tomorrow with south to southwesterly winds becoming light before dawn. We're heading for 22 degrees in the city, a high of 21 in Wollongong and Gosford, and climbing up to 23 tomorrow in the west. The sun will rise at 5:51, setting at 5:49 p.m. and ahead. A wide temperature range on Wednesday. The city climbing from 9 to 27 degrees, and for the west, 5 to 27. Thursday should be warm and windy, tops of 27. Then staying sunny on Friday, 24 to 25. And at this stage, it's looking like a warm and mostly sunny weekend. Jeremy?
Tom, thank you. Here's Laura Tingle for you now, standing by with 7:30.